I never expected my ordinary Tuesday morning to shatter everything I thought I knew about workplace boundaries. I was rushing down the hallway toward the copy room when I heard Nicole's unmistakable laugh echoing from the supply closet. My boss had this distinctive, throaty chuckle that could charm clients and intimidate employees in equal measure. What made me pause wasn't the laughter itself, but the responding voice. Young, eager, definitely male. I recognized it immediately as Jake, our newest intern. The 24-year-old had started just 3 weeks ago, fresh out of business school, with that puppy dog enthusiasm that made everyone want to either mentor him or roll their eyes. I should have kept walking, should have minded my own business, and pretended I hadn't heard anything. But something about the intimate tone of their conversation made my feet freeze to the marble floor. "You're incredible, Nicole," Jake's voice drifted through the slightly ajar door. "I can't believe someone like you would even notice someone like me." Nicole's response was a purr that made my stomach turn. "Oh, sweetheart, you have no idea what you do to me. Those presentations you've been giving, the way you look at me during meetings, it's been driving me absolutely wild." My mouth went dry. Nicole was married, happily married, or so I'd always believed. She wore her wedding ring like a badge of honor, constantly talking about her husband David and their weekend plans. She'd been my role model for 3 years, the epitome of having it all. Successful career, loving marriage, designer wardrobe that made every day look like a fashion shoot. The sound of rustling papers and muffled whispers sent me backing away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to get out of there before they emerged and caught me eavesdropping like some teenage gossip. I spun around too quickly, my armload of quarterly reports scattering across the polished floor like oversized confetti. Papers flew everywhere, financial projections, budget analyses, performance reviews. The sound echoed through the hallway like a small explosion. "Damn it," I whispered, dropping to my knees and frantically trying to gather the documents before anyone saw the mess I'd made. That's when I heard footsteps approaching, measured, confident, distinctly masculine. My cheeks burned as I scrambled to collect the papers, not daring to look up. "Here, let me help you with that." But the voice was warm, sophisticated, with just a hint of an accent I'd never been able to place. I looked up to find Richard extending his hand, his kind brown eyes filled with genuine concern rather than judgment. Richard was our CFO, a man who commanded respect without ever raising his voice. At 50, he had the kind of distinguished presence that made boardrooms go quiet when he spoke. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and he always wore perfectly tailored suits that suggested success without being flashy. "Thank you," I managed, accepting his help as we both knelt on the floor, gathering my scattered work. Our fingers brushed as we reached for the same document, and I felt an unexpected jolt of electricity shoot up my arm. Richard must have felt it too, because his hand lingered for just a moment longer than necessary, his thumb grazing across my knuckles. "Ashley," he said softly, and hearing my name in his voice made something flutter deep in my chest. Are you all right? You seem flustered. I couldn't tell him what I'd overheard, couldn't explain that I'd just discovered my mentor was having an affair with someone barely older than my younger brother. Instead, I focused on the way Richard's presence seemed to steady me, like an anchor in the sudden storm of my emotions. Just clumsy today, I guess, I said, trying to inject some lightness into my voice. Richard smiled, and I noticed the way it reached his eyes, creating small lines that spoke of genuine warmth rather than practiced corporate politeness. I doubt that. I've been watching your work lately, Ashley. Your attention to detail, your dedication. It's impressive. The compliment sent heat rushing through me, and I found myself really looking at Richard for the first time. Not just as the distinguished executive who signed my paychecks, but as a man, the way his shirt fit across his broad shoulders, how his hands moved with confident precision as he stacked my papers, the subtle cologne that smelled like cedar, and something indefinably masculine. You've been watching my work, I asked, surprised by the breathiness in my own voice. Richard's eyes held mine as we both stood, the recovered documents now neatly organized in his capable hands. Hard not to notice excellence when it's right in front of you. Yet the compliment hung between us, loaded with something that felt dangerous and thrilling. I was 33 years old, certainly old enough to recognize attraction when it sparked. But this felt different, more mature, more complicated than the usual office crushes I'd witnessed over the years. I should get these back to my desk, I said, though I made no move to take the papers from his hands. Of course, Richard's smile was understanding, but his eyes lingered on my face. Ashley, if you ever need anything, help with a project, someone to talk through a problem, my door is always open. But the offer felt like more than professional courtesy, and I found myself nodding perhaps more eagerly than I should have. Thank you, Richard. That means a lot. As he handed me the papers, our fingers touched again, and this time neither of us pulled away immediately. The moment stretched between us, filled with unspoken possibilities that made my pulse quicken. The sound of the supply closet door opening down the hall broke the spell. Richard stepped back professionally, but not before I caught the way his gaze dropped briefly. I'll see you around, Ashley, he said, his voice carrying a warmth that felt like a promise. I watched him walk away, noting the confident set of his shoulders, the way his presence seemed to command the very air around him. When I finally looked at the supply closet, I saw Nicole emerging with perfectly composed hair, and Jake trailing behind her like a lovesick puppy. Nicole caught my eye and smiled that brilliant, practiced smile she wore like armor. Ashley, how's your morning going, darling? I managed to return her smile, but something had fundamentally shifted. The woman I'd admired for years was not who I thought she was, and the man I'd barely noticed before had just ignited something I wasn't sure I was ready to examine. That evening, I found myself staying late at the office, telling myself I needed to catch up on work. But if I was being honest, I was hoping for another encounter with Richard. The thought of his hands, his voice, the way he'd said my name, it all swirled through my mind as I pretended to focus on spreadsheets. The discovery of Nicole's affair had shattered one illusion, but in its place, something far more intriguing was beginning to bloom. The next morning, I found myself clutching the quarterly reports like a lifeline as I made my way to Richard's office. My heart hammered against my ribs as I knocked on his door, the sound echoing my nervous pulse. "Come in," his deep voice called, and I stepped inside to find him reviewing financial projections. His reading glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look distinguished and approachable at once. "Ashley," he said, looking up with a smile that made my stomach flutter, "what brings you by? These reports need your approval," I managed, setting them on his desk. Our fingers brushed as he reached for them, and I felt that same electric current from yesterday. "Excellent work," he said, scanning the documents. "Your analysis of the third quarter projections is particularly insightful. You have a gift for seeing patterns others miss." The compliment sent warmth spreading through my chest. When was the last time someone had praised my mind instead of just commenting on my appearance? "Thank you. I've been studying the market trends for months." "It shows," Richard said, leaning back in his chair. "You know, I've been watching your work for a while now. You're wasted in your current position." I blinked in surprise. "You've been watching my work. Hard not to notice quality when you see it." His eyes held mine, and I felt seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Tell me, Ashley, what do you really want from your career here?" The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that before. Not Nicole, not HR, not anyone. I want to matter, to make decisions that impact the company, not just execute other people's visions. "And what's stopping you?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Sometimes I feel invisible here, like I'm just part of the furniture, you know. People see me, but they don't really see me." Richard's expression softened. "I understand that feeling more than you might think. After my divorce was finalized last month, I felt invisible too, like I'd been playing a role for so long. I'd forgotten who I actually was underneath it all." And the revelation that he was officially single sent a thrill through me that I tried to suppress. "I'm sorry about your divorce." "Don't be," he said with a rueful smile. "Best thing that ever happened to me, actually. Sometimes you need to lose what you thought you wanted to find what you actually need." The weight of his words settled between us, and I found myself wondering if he meant more than just his marriage. The way he was looking at me suggested he might. "I should let you get back to work," I said reluctantly, but he shook his head. "Stay a moment longer. I was about to take a coffee break anyway. Join me." 10 minutes later, we were sitting in the small conference room adjacent to his office, 2 steaming cups between us. Richard had loosened his tie slightly, and I found myself fascinated by the glimpse of his collarbone. "So tell me about yourself, Ashley. The real you, not the corporate version." I laughed nervously. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," he said simply. and the intensity in his voice made my breath catch. We talked for nearly an hour. I told him about my love of vintage books, my secret dream of traveling to Scotland, my complicated relationship with my family. He shared stories about his photography hobby, his recent hiking trips, the small apartment he'd moved into after his separation. You know, he said as we prepared to leave, there's a new exhibition opening at the Metropolitan Museum this weekend. Photography from the Scottish Highlands. Thought you might enjoy it. My heart skipped. Are you asking me to go with you? I am, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. If you're interested, I'm very interested, I breathed. The smile that spread across his face was worth every nervous flutter in my stomach. Saturday at 2. It's a date, I said, then immediately blushed at my choice of words. Yes, Richard said softly. It is. I floated back to my desk. But my euphoria was short-lived. Nicole's voice carried from her office, and something in her tone made me pause by the supply where I could hear more clearly. Told you, Jake, patience is a virtue. The promotion will come, but these things take time. But you promised. Jake's young voice was plaintive, desperate. And I keep my promises, don't I? Haven't I been good to you? The suggestive tone in Nicole's voice made my skin crawl. I crept closer, my heart pounding for entirely different reasons now. What about Marcus from accounting? Jake asked. He said you told him the same thing about the junior analyst position. Nicole's laugh was cold. Marcus talks too much. Don't worry about what I tell other people, darling. Focus on what I'm telling you. I pressed myself against the wall, horror washing over me as the pieces fell into place. Marcus had been devastated when he didn't get that promotion last month. He'd worked overtime for weeks, convinced he was a shoo-in. I just don't understand why we have to keep this secret if you really care about me, Jake continued. Because the world isn't ready for our connection, Nicole said smoothly. But trust me, baby, you're special to me. Very special. I felt sick. The woman I'd admired, looked up to, modeled myself after she was a predator, using her position to manipulate young employees with promises she had no intention of keeping. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was from an unknown number, but the message made my blood run cold. Hey, Ashley, it's Marcus from accounting. Can we talk? I found some texts on my old phone that I think you should see. About Nicole. I stared at the message, my mind reeling. How many others were there? How many young, hopeful employees had Nicole strung along with false promises and stolen kisses in supply closets? Another text appeared. She's doing the same thing to Jake that she did to me, and probably others. I have proof. I looked toward Nicole's office, where I could still hear her honeyed voice weaving more lies, more false promises. Then I thought about Richard, about the way he'd looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth knowing and respecting. The contrast was stark and telling. While Nicole preyed on vulnerability and inexperience, Richard saw strength and potential. While she manipulated with false promises, he offered genuine encouragement and opportunity. I typed back to Marcus. Yes, let's talk. Tonight after work. His response was immediate. Conference room C at 6. Bring tissues. This is worse than you think. As I slipped my phone back into my pocket, I caught sight of Nicole emerging from her office with that perfect smile firmly in place. She spotted me and waved cheerfully, as if she hadn't just been emotionally manipulating a young man barely out of college. Ashley, darling, how's your day going? I managed to smile back, but inside, I was burning with a mixture of disgust and determination. She had no idea that her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. Drop a comment and tell me, team reconciliation or team revenge? Because after what I was about to discover in that conference room with Marcus, Nicole's reign of manipulation was going to come to a very public end. The only question was whether she'd have a chance to explain herself, or if justice would be swift and merciless. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. Richard's respect and genuine interest had shown me what real connection looked like, and after years of being invisible, I was finally ready to be seen. The hours crawled by after my exchange with Marcus. Every time Nicole walked past my desk with that practiced smile, my stomach churned. I found myself watching her interactions with the younger staff members differently now, noting the way she lingered just a little too long at their desks, the way her hand would rest on their shoulders. By 5:30, most of the office had cleared out. The quarterly reports Richard had mentioned earlier still sat in a neat stack on my desk, waiting for final review. I'd been so distracted by Nicole's drama that I hadn't given them the attention they deserved. A soft knock on my cubicle wall made me look up. Richard stood there, loosening his tie, his reading glasses pushed up into his salt and pepper hair. Still here, Ashley. I thought you'd escaped by now. Just finishing up the quarterly analysis you wanted, I said, gesturing to the reports. I got a bit behind today. His expression softened with understanding. The Nicole situation weighing on your mind. I nodded, surprised by his perceptiveness. Among other things, would you like some help with those reports? I've got a bottle of wine in my office that's been calling my name all week. He paused, studying my face. Sometimes the numbers make more sense. With a glass of good red, there was something in his voice, an invitation that went beyond work. My pulse quickened. I don't want to keep you, I said, even as every cell in my body screamed yes. Ashley. The way he said my name made me look up, really look at him. You wouldn't be keeping me. I'd like the company. 15 minutes later, I found myself in Richard's corner office, the city lights twinkling below us through floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd poured 2 generous glasses of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Chez Margox, 2015, he said, handing me a glass. Life's too short for mediocre wine. I took a sip and nearly moaned at the complexity of flavors. This is incredible. Good wine, like good people, reveals its depth slowly. His eyes met mine over the rim of his glass, and I felt that familiar electric current. We spread the quarterly reports across his mahogany desk. but I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on profit margins and revenue projections. With Richard sitting so close, his cologne, something expensive and understated, mixed with the wine's bouquet in a way that made my head spin. Your analysis of the third quarter trends is brilliant, he said, leaning over my shoulder to point at a graph. His breath was warm against my ear. You've identified patterns that even our senior analysts missed. His proximity was intoxicating. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders. Richard, I said softly, turning in my chair to face him. He was so close now that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could count the laugh lines that spoke of a life fully lived. I've been thinking about you, he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. Constantly, if I'm being honest. Ever since that moment when we picked up those papers together, my heart hammered against my ribs. You have. You're not like anyone I've ever met, Ashley. Your mind, your insights, the way you see straight through the corporate nonsense to what really matters. He reached out, his fingers barely grazing my cheek. And you're absolutely beautiful. The wine, the intimacy of the empty office, the way he was looking at me like I was something precious. It all combined into a perfect storm of desire. Richard, I whispered, and then somehow we were kissing. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was hungry, desperate, months of unspoken attraction exploding between us. His hands tangled in my hair, while mine gripped the lapels of his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like wine and promise, like everything I'd been missing without knowing it. When he deepened the kiss, I made a sound I didn't recognize, something between a sigh and a plea. God, Ashley, he breathed against my lips, his hands framed my face. I've wanted this for so long. Somehow we ended up against his desk. The quarterly reports, scattered forgotten, across the floor. His mouth moved to my neck, finding that spot that made me gasp and arch against him. You're incredible, he murmured, his lips trailing fire across my skin. So damn incredible. I felt beautiful under his gaze, sophisticated in a way I'd never experienced. This wasn't the fumbling attraction of my 20s. This was mature desire, complex and intoxicating. His hands found the hem of my blouse, and I didn't protest when he began unbuttoning it with trembling fingers. The cool office air hit my skin, but I felt nothing but heat. Are you sure? He asked, his voice strained with control. In answer, I reached for his tie, loosening it with hands that shook slightly. He groaned low in his throat, a sound that sent electricity straight through me. We were lost in each other, in the wine and the darkness and the desperate need that had been building between us for months. His mouth found mine again, more urgent this time, and I could taste the want on his lips. But then, the harsh ring of his desk phone cut through the haze of desire. We froze, breathing heavily, suddenly aware of where we were, what we were doing. The reality of the situation hit us both at the same time. We should. He started, his voice hoarse. Yes, I agreed quickly, stepping back and smoothing down my hair with shaking hands. But neither of us moved to answer the phone. We just stood there, staring at each other, the air between us crackling with unfinished business. "This changes everything," Richard said finally, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know," I whispered. "I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of my position, or that this is just—" "It's not," I interrupted. "This isn't about the office hierarchy, Richard. This is about us." He nodded slowly, relief evident in his expression. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night. Away from here. Somewhere we can talk without interruption." "Yes," I said without hesitation. As I gathered my things and prepared to leave, Richard caught my hand. "Ashley," he said seriously, "I meant what I said about you being incredible. This isn't casual for me." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. "It's not casual for me either." Walking to the elevator, I felt like I was floating. Every nerve ending was still alive with the memory of his touch, his kiss, the way he'd looked at me like I was everything he'd ever wanted. For the first time in years, I felt truly desired, not just physically, but intellectually, emotionally. Richard saw me as an equal, a partner, not just another employee to manage. As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. My lips were still swollen from his kisses, my eyes bright with possibility. Tomorrow night couldn't come soon enough. The next evening, I stood outside Richard's penthouse building in downtown Chicago, my hands trembling as I checked my reflection in the glass doors. I changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a midnight blue dress that hugged my curves without being too obvious. Richard answered his door in dark jeans and a cream cashmere sweater, looking devastatingly handsome in the soft lighting of his apartment. The space was elegant, but warm exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and the faint scent of sandalwood in the air. "You look breathtaking," he said, his eyes drinking me in as he took my coat. Dinner was perfect. We talked about everything: books, travel, our dreams beyond the corporate world. Richard had prepared salmon with asparagus himself, served with a bottle of Sansera that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "I never expected this," I admitted as we moved to his leather sofa, wine glasses in hand. "When I walked into your office that first day, I thought you'd be another stuffy executive." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "And I thought you were just another ambitious analyst." I was so wrong. When he kissed me this time, there were no interruptions, no office phones or quarterly reports to pull us back to reality. His hands traced the curve of my waist, my hip, with a reverence that made me feel like a goddess. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered against my neck. "I've never been more sure of anything," I breathed. What followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Richard worshipped my body with a patience and skill that left me gasping. He took his time, learning every sensitive spot, every sound I made, as if memorizing me. When we finally came together, it was with an intensity that shattered every preconception I'd had about desire. Afterward, lying against his chest while he traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. I felt completely transformed. "Stay tonight," he murmured into my hair. I did. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. We had perfect professionalism at the office. Richard was careful never to show favoritism, never to let our personal relationship affect business decisions. But 3 nights a week, I found myself at his penthouse, losing myself in his arms and his bed. The secrecy was intoxicating, but exhausting. During board meetings, I had to fight not to stare at his hands as he gestured, remembering how those same fingers had traced fire across my skin the night before when he'd brush past me in the hallway. The brief contact would send electricity shooting through me, but the complications were mounting. Nicole announced 2 surprise promotions, Jake to senior analyst and another young employee, David, to project coordinator. Both men looked shell-shocked by their sudden advancement, and I noticed the guilty glances they exchanged. When Nicole praised their exceptional dedication to the company, Marcus caught me in the break room the next day, his expression grim. "She got to David too," he said quietly, pretending to fix his coffee. Same pattern. Late meetings, personal attention, promises of advancement. The kid doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. My stomach churned. How many others? At least 4 that I know of over the past 2 years. Maybe more. That night at Richard's apartment, I struggled to focus as he told me about his day. He was excited about a new acquisition deal, his eyes bright with professional enthusiasm as he explained the financial projections. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, pulling me closer on the sofa. "Everything okay at work?" I wanted to tell him everything. About Nicole, about the evidence I'd been collecting, about the young men being manipulated and used. But how could I explain that I'd been conducting a secret investigation without sounding like I was questioning his judgment about Nicole's leadership? "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't tell Richard directly, not yet, but I couldn't stay silent either. I compiled everything Marcus and I had discovered: screenshots of inappropriate text messages, documentation of the suspicious promotion patterns, witness statements from other employees who'd noticed Nicole's behavior. Instead of going to Richard, I left an anonymous envelope on HR Director Patricia Wilson's desk. Inside was all the evidence, along with a typed note. "Patricia, this requires immediate investigation. Multiple employees are being sexually exploited by senior management." I watched from across the office as Patricia discovered the envelope, saw her face pale as she read through the contents. Within an hour, she was in closed-door meetings with the CEO. That evening at Richard's penthouse, he seemed distracted during dinner. "Something wrong?" I asked, though my heart was already racing. "There's some kind of HR investigation happening," he said, running his hands through his hair. Very hush-hush. Patricia wouldn't give me details, but it involves someone in senior management. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was panicking. "Any idea who?" "No, but the timing is terrible. We're in the middle of the Meridian acquisition, and the last thing we need is a scandal. I wanted to reassure him, to explain that exposing Nicole's predatory behavior would ultimately protect the company. But I was trapped by my own secrecy. 2 days later, Nicole was called into an emergency meeting with HR and the CEO. She emerged pale and shaken, immediately gathering her personal items from her office. The official announcement came that afternoon. Nicole was taking an immediate leave of absence for personal reasons, and Richard would be assuming her responsibilities temporarily. That night, Richard was exhausted when he got home. "I can't believe this is happening," he said, pouring himself a scotch. "Nicole's been with the company for 8 years. Patricia won't tell me the details of the investigation, just that it's serious enough to warrant immediate suspension." I curled up next to him on the sofa, guilt eating at me. "I'm sure HR will handle it properly. I keep thinking I should have seen signs," he continued. "As CFO, I work closely with all the department heads. How could I have missed something significant enough to warrant this kind of action?" The pain in his voice made my chest ache. Here was a man who took his responsibilities seriously, who was blaming himself for something he couldn't have prevented. "You can't monitor everyone's personal behavior," I said softly. "Some people are just good at hiding who they really are." He looked at me then, his eyes searching. "You're right. I just hate that someone might have been hurt while I was oblivious." I wanted to tell him the truth then, that his instincts were good, that he wasn't to blame, that the person who'd been hurt was being protected now. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain that I'd been keeping this massive secret from him? That I'd been investigating his colleague while sharing his bed, lying there in his arms later that night, listening to his steady breathing. I felt the weight of all my secrets pressing down on me. I was falling deeper in love with Richard every day, but I was also deceiving him in ways that could destroy everything we'd built together. What would you do in my position? Tell me in the comments below. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept. Richard's warm body beside me, a constant reminder of the lies building between us. When his alarm went off at 6, I pretended to be asleep, watching through barely open eyes as he dressed in the dim light. "I'll call you later," he whispered, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead before leaving. The moment his footsteps faded down the hallway, I buried my face in his pillow, breathing in his scent. How had I gotten myself into this mess? At the office, I threw myself into work, trying to distract from the guilt gnawing at my stomach. Richard had taken over Nicole's responsibilities, which meant more meetings, more pressure, more time away from me during office hours. We'd agreed to keep things professional at work, but every stolen glance across the conference room made my heart race. By 7 that evening, most of the staff had gone home. I was finishing up some quarterly projections when Richard texted, "Still here. Come by my office." My pulse quickened. These after-hours visits were becoming our routine, stolen moments between his official duties and our secret relationship. I touched up my lipstick in the bathroom mirror, smoothing my black pencil skirt and adjusting my silk blouse. Richard's corner office felt like a sanctuary. He was standing by the window, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle below. When he heard me enter, he turned with that smile that never failed to make my knees weak. "Long day?" I asked, closing the door behind me. "Better now." He crossed to me in 3 quick strides, his hands cupping my face as he kissed me deeply. I melted against him, all my worries temporarily forgotten in the warmth of his embrace. "I've been thinking about you all day," he murmured against my lips. "These stolen moments aren't enough anymore, Ashley. I want to take you away somewhere, just us." "Where would we go?" I asked, running my fingers along his line. "Anywhere, Paris maybe, or that little vineyard in Napa I've been wanting to visit." His eyes were soft, vulnerable. "I know this is complicated with work and everything, but what we have, it's real, isn't it?" The guilt hit like a physical blow. Here he was, planning romantic getaways, while I was keeping massive secrets about his suspended colleague. "Yes," I whispered, because it was true. Whatever else was happening, my feelings for Richard were absolutely real. "It's real." We spent another 20 minutes talking softly, his arm around me as we sat on his leather sofa. When I finally left his office, my lipstick was smudged, my hair slightly mussed from his fingers running through it. I was so lost in the afterglow of our time together that I almost didn't see her. Nicole was standing by the elevators, arms crossed, watching me with those cold blue eyes. My heart stopped. She looked impeccable as always, not a hair out of place despite being suspended. Wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Ashley," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Working late again, I see." I forced myself to walk normally, hoping she wouldn't notice my disheveled appearance. "Just finishing up some reports." Her gaze flicked over me, taking in every detail. "Lipsticks, a bit smudged, dear. Might want to fix that before you get home." My blood turned to ice. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, holding them open with one perfectly manicured hand. "Coming?" she asked pleasantly. I had no choice but to join her. The moment the doors closed, the temperature in the small space seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Interesting timing," Nicole said, studying her reflection in the polished steel doors. "Richard working late too, is he?" I kept my expression neutral. "I wouldn't know. I was focused on my own work." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Ashley, you really think you're clever, don't you?" The elevator seemed to be moving in slow motion. Floors crawled by 15, 14, 13. "I don't know what you mean," I said carefully. "Of course you don't." She turned to face me fully, and I saw something dangerous flickering in her eyes. "Let me be more direct then. I know about the anonymous tips to HR, the convenient timing of my suspension, the way you've been cozying up to Richard." My mouth went dry. "Nicole, I think you're confused." "Am I?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop whatever little game you're playing with HR. You're going to tell them you made a mistake, that the information was unreliable. I don't know what you're talking about, I repeated, but my voice wavered. And if you don't, she continued as if I hadn't spoken, I'll make sure the board knows exactly how you've been spending your evenings. Richard's reputation won't survive a scandal like that. Neither will yours. The elevator reached the ground floor with a soft chime. Nicole stepped out, then turned back to me. Think about it, darling. Is your little crush worth destroying both your careers? The doors closed, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the sickening realization that Nicole was more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. That night, I paced my apartment like a caged animal. Richard called twice, but I let it go to voicemail. How could I explain the fear churning in my stomach without revealing everything when he finally showed up at my door at 9:30, concern written across his features? I nearly broke down. Ashley, what's wrong? He pulled me into his arms the moment I let him in. You've been avoiding my calls. I'm just tired, I lied, breathing in his familiar scent. Long day, but he knew me too well already. His fingers tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. Something's bothering you. Talk to me. I wanted to tell him everything about Nicole's threats, about my role in her suspension, about the fear that was eating me alive. Instead, I pulled him down for a desperate kiss. I love you, I whispered against his lips, and meant it completely. I love you too, he said, confusion and concern still clouding his eyes. But Ashley, please, I interrupted. Can we just be together tonight? No talking about work or anything else. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Of course, but as we lay in bed later, his arm around me, I could feel the distance my secrets were creating between us. Nicole's threat echoed in my mind. Is your little crush worth destroying both your careers? The next morning brought a new nightmare. Marcus from accounting called me before I'd even had my coffee. Ashley, you need to know what's happening. His voice was urgent, worried. Nicole's been calling people, spreading rumors. What kind of rumors? But I already knew, cold dread settling in my stomach. She's telling people you've been sleeping with Richard, that you're trying to advance your career the same way the same way she did with us. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in around me. Nicole was playing chess while I'd been playing checkers, and she was already 3 moves ahead. How many people has she called? I asked quietly. I don't know, but Ashley, some of them are listening. Janet from payroll mentioned something yesterday about women who use their looks to get ahead. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my untouched coffee, watching my carefully constructed world begin to crumble around me. Nicole had found the perfect weapon, the truth, twisted just enough to destroy everything I cared about. The emergency board meeting was called for 10 a.m. that Tuesday. I sat in my office, hands trembling as I tried to focus on quarterly projections. but the numbers blurred together on my screen. Marcus's warning about Nicole's rumor campaign had kept me awake all night. And now, this sudden meeting had my stomach in knots. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Emergency, meeting about workplace conduct. Don't worry, this isn't about us. But how could he be so sure? Nicole had been methodically poisoning the well, turning my colleagues against me with carefully crafted half-truths. I'd seen the sideways glances in the hallway, heard conversations stop when I entered a room. At exactly 10:15, my assistant knocked on my door. Ashley, the board meeting just ended. I thought you'd want to know. What happened? I asked, my voice barely steady. Someone leaked Nicole's text messages. All of them. The board has her phone records, chat logs with Jake, David, Marcus, even that new intern from marketing. Everything. Relief flooded through me so suddenly, I had to grip my desk chair. What does that mean? Nicole's been terminated. Effective immediately. Security escorted her out 20 minutes ago. I should have felt victorious. Justice had finally caught up with Nicole's predatory behavior. But instead, I felt hollow, drained by weeks of deception and fear. That feeling lasted exactly 37 minutes. Nicole burst through my office door like a hurricane, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, her designer suit wrinkled. Security badges dangled from her trembling hands. Apparently, she'd convinced someone to let her back in to collect personal items. You conniving little bitch, she snarled, slamming my door so hard the frosted glass rattled. You think you're so clever, don't you? I stood slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nicole, you shouldn't be here. Security. Fuck security. She advanced toward my desk, her face twisted with rage. 2 years I spent building my career at this company. 2 years of playing their games, giving those pathetic boys exactly what they wanted. And you destroyed it all. You destroyed yourself, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. What you did to those employees was predatory. Illegal, she laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Predatory. They were willing participants, Ashley. Eager participants. Do you think Jake complained when I gave him that promotion? Do you think Marcus minded when I recommended him for the senior analyst position? You manipulated them. Used your position of power the same way you're using Richard. Her smile was venomous. Oh yes, sweetie. I know all about your little after-hours meetings, your cozy wine sessions in his office, the way you've been fucking your way to the top just like I did. The words hit me like physical blows. That's not Richard and I. What? It's different because you have feelings. Nicole circled my desk like a predator. Because you think what you have is real. Wake up, Ashley. Powerful men don't fall for their subordinates. They use them and move on. You're wrong, I whispered, but doubt crept into my voice. Am I? Tell me. Does Richard know you were behind the anonymous tips to HR? Does he know you've been investigating me for weeks while playing the innocent little lamb in his arms? My silence was answer enough. I thought so. Nicole's smile grew wider, more vicious. You want to know the difference between us, Ashley. I was honest about what I was doing. I never pretended it was love. That's when Richard walked in. He'd clearly intended to knock, but the door was slightly ajar from Nicole's violent entrance. His charcoal suit was impeccable as always, but his face went pale as he took in the scene. Nicole standing over my desk, me backed against the window, both of us looking guilty and cornered. Ashley, his voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the confusion underneath. Nicole, I thought security escorted you out. Nicole turned toward him, and her expression shifted to something calculating, dangerous. Richard, perfect timing. I was just telling Ashley how much I'm going to miss working with both of you. Something in her tone made Richard step fully into the office, closing the door behind him. What's going on here? Oh, just sharing some workplace gossip, Nicole said sweetly. Did you know that your lovely Ashley here has been moonlighting as an HR informant? All those anonymous tips about my alleged misconduct. That was our girl. Richard's eyes found mine, and I saw the moment understanding hit him. The confusion, then hurt, then something harder I couldn't identify. Ashley, his voice was quietly devastated. Is that true? I wanted to explain, to tell him how I'd planned to confess everything, how I'd hated keeping secrets from him. But Nicole wasn't finished destroying us. She's been playing detective for weeks, Nicole continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy, gathering evidence, building cases, all while warming your bed and pretending to be the sweet, innocent analyst you fell for. That's enough, Richard said sharply, but his eyes never left my face. Is it though? Nicole moved closer to him, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Because I think you deserve to know exactly who you've been sleeping with. Ashley didn't investigate me out of some noble sense of justice. Richard, she did it because she was jealous, because she wanted you, and I was in her way. Stop, I finally found my voice. Just stop, Nicole. You're twisting everything. Am I? Tell him, Ashley. Tell Richard how you felt when you saw me with Jake. Tell him how you realized you could use my secrets to eliminate the competition and clear your path to the CFO's bed. The office fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and my own ragged breathing. Richard stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, waiting. It wasn't like that, I said quietly, knowing how inadequate the words sounded. Nicole laughed again. Of course it wasn't. Just like what I did wasn't manipulation. Just like what you're doing isn't calculated. We're all just innocent victims of circumstance, aren't we? She gathered her purse and headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. You know what the real tragedy is, Richard. She actually might have loved you. But now you'll never know if any of it was real, will you? The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Richard and me alone in the wreckage she'd created. If you're hooked on this story, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. He stood there for a long moment, his hands clasped behind his back, studying the floor. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a pain that made my chest ache. "How long?" he asked simply. "Richard, please let me explain. How long have you been investigating Nicole?" I closed my eyes. Since before that first night." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. "And you never thought to tell me? Even when I told you I was falling for you, I wanted to. God, Richard, I wanted to tell you everything. But I was scared. Scared of what? That I wouldn't understand, that I wouldn't support you doing the right thing. Scared that you'd think exactly what you're thinking now," I whispered. "That it was all calculated, that none of it was real." He was quiet for so long I thought he might leave without another word. Finally, he spoke, his voice hollow. "The thing is, Ashley, I don't know what to think anymore, because the woman I thought I knew wouldn't have kept something this important from me. The woman I thought I was falling for wouldn't have let me walk into board meetings blind, while she orchestrated investigations behind my back. I am that woman," I said desperately. "I'm the same person who kissed you in this office, who shared wine with you. Who are you?" He looked at me with such sadness it broke my heart, because right now I feel like I don't know you at all. He left without another word, the soft click of my office door closing behind him echoing like a gunshot in the silence. I sank into my chair, staring at the space where he'd stood, replaying every painful word. The next morning, I arrived to find an email from HR waiting in my inbox, effective immediately. Both Richard and I were suspended, pending a full investigation into our relationship and its potential impact on the Nicole situation. The corporate machinery had already begun grinding us up. I packed my personal items into a cardboard box with trembling hands, the framed photo of my parents, my favorite coffee mug, the small, succulent Richard had noticed on my desk that first night we'd shared wine. Everything felt tainted now, contaminated by the wreckage Nicole had left behind. "Ashley," Nicole's voice made me freeze. She stood in my doorway, looking remarkably composed for someone who'd just been terminated. Her designer suit was immaculate, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Security should have escorted you out," I said, not looking up from my box. "They did, but I have friends here too, you know, people who understand that sometimes good employees get railroaded by ambitious little climbers." I finally met her gaze. "Is that what you're telling people? That I'm the problem here?" "I'm telling them the truth, that a junior analyst seduced a senior executive to advance her career, then orchestrated my downfall when I discovered their affair." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's actually quite believable, don't you think? The innocent young woman, the distinguished older man, the jealous female boss who had to be eliminated." My hands clenched around a paperweight. "You're the one who destroyed those young men's careers. You're the predator here. Prove it," she said simply. "Because right now, the narrative that's spreading through this building is very different. Poor Nicole, destroyed by a vindictive subordinate who couldn't handle a little constructive criticism. She was right, and we both knew it. In the absence of facts, People would create their own story, and Nicole had always been masterful at managing perceptions. "You won't win," I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "I already have." She glanced at my packed box. "Enjoy your suspension, Ashley. I hear they can last months." After she left, I sat alone in my empty office, the weight of what I'd lost crushing down on me. Not just my job, though that was devastating enough, but Richard, the man who'd made me believe in second chances, in the possibility of finding real love when I'd least expected it. I tried calling him that afternoon. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again that evening, and the next morning, and the day after that. Each unanswered ring felt like another nail in the coffin of whatever we'd had. A week into my suspension, I finally got a text from him. "Need time to think. Please don't call." 4 words that shattered what was left of my heart. I spent my days in my apartment, alternating between fury at Nicole's manipulation and devastating regret over my own choices, that I handled everything wrong. Should I have told Richard about the investigation from the beginning? The questions tormented me, playing on an endless loop. My friend Sarah came over one afternoon, finding me in my pajamas at 2 p.m., surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled tissues. "Honey, you can't keep doing this to yourself," she said, settling beside me on the couch. "What happened with Nicole? That's not your fault. You did the right thing reporting her." "But I lied to Richard," I whispered. "I let him think I was just innocent, pure, when really I was playing the same games as everyone else." "You weren't playing games. You were protecting yourself and those other employees. There's a difference." "Is there?" Because Nicole's right about one thing. I did use our relationship. Maybe not consciously, but having Richard's protection made it easier to take risks with the investigation. "What does that make me?" Sarah gripped my shoulders. "It makes you human. You found yourself in an impossible situation, and you did your best to navigate it. The fact that you fell for your boss doesn't negate the good you did." But even her reassurance couldn't silence the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like Nicole, whispering that I was no different from her after all. 2 weeks into the suspension, Marcus called me. His voice was shaky, uncertain. "Ashley, I heard about everything. About you and Mr. Garrett being suspended. Marcus, I'm so sorry. This isn't how I wanted things to." "No, listen. I wanted to thank you. What you did, reporting Nicole, it saved me. It saved all of us. But now everyone's saying you only did it to protect yourself, or to help your boyfriend. Or, I don't know what people are thinking, but it's all wrong." Tears sprang to my eyes. "It doesn't matter what people think. What matters is that she can't hurt anyone else. It does matter, because you're good people, and you don't deserve this. I've been thinking, maybe I should come forward, tell HR exactly what Nicole did to me, officially this time. Make it clear that you were protecting us, not playing some corporate game." "Marcus, you don't have to do that. I know how hard it would be. I want to. We all do. Jake, David, Tommy from marketing. We've been talking, and we're ready to tell the truth. All of it." What she did, how she threatened us, how scared we were. Maybe if the investigation hears from us directly, they'll understand what really happened here. After he hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Not for my job, that might be gone forever, but for the possibility that the truth might actually matter. That night, I finally stopped trying to call Richard. Instead, I wrote him a letter. Not an email or a text that could be deleted with a swipe, but an actual letter on cream-colored stationery, written in my careful script. I told him everything about discovering Nicole with Jake, about Marcus reaching out, about the impossible choice between protecting those young men and protecting what we'd found together. I told him about the nights I'd lain awake, wanting to confide in him, held back only by the fear of dragging him into something that could destroy his career too. Most importantly, I told him the truth that Nicole's poison couldn't touch, that every moment between us had been real. Every laugh, every stolen glance, every heartbeat when he'd kissed me in his office. None of it had been calculated or planned. It had simply been love, messy and complicated, and absolutely genuine. I sealed the letter and walked to his building in the evening rain, my heart pounding as I slipped it under his apartment door. Whatever happened next, he would know the truth. All of it. As I walked home through the empty streets, I realized something had shifted inside me. The crushing weight of shame and regret was still there, but underneath, it was something harder, more determined. Nicole might have won this battle, but she hadn't broken me. I'd lost Richard, maybe forever. I'd probably lost my career too, but I'd also learned something precious about myself, that when faced with an impossible choice, I'd chosen to protect the vulnerable rather than protect myself. That had to count for something. It had to be enough to build whatever came next on. The week that followed felt like living underwater. Everything was muffled, distant, unreal. I'd wake up each morning forgetting, for just a moment, that my life had imploded. Then reality would crash back in waves. I'd submitted my resignation letter to HR on Tuesday, effective immediately. There was no point fighting the suspension when Nicole's version of events was already spreading through the office like wildfire. Better to leave with what little dignity I had left than endure weeks of whispered accusations and pitying looks. Marcus had texted twice, asking if I was okay. Jake had called once, his voice shaking as he thanked me for what I'd done. "You saved us," he'd said, but it felt hollow when I couldn't save myself. By Friday evening, I was surviving on takeout containers and cheap wine, watching mindless television in my pajamas when the knock came at my door. 3 soft raps, hesitant but deliberate. My heart stopped. I knew that knock somehow, the careful rhythm of it. I padded to the door in my worn slippers, peering through the peephole with my pulse hammering. Richard stood in the hallway, looking uncertain in a way I'd never seen before. He held a bouquet of white roses in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. For a moment, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then my hands were fumbling with the locks, my fingers clumsy with shock and hope and terror, all tangled together. "Richard," I whispered as the door swung open. He looked tired, older somehow than he had a week ago. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, his shirt wrinkled as if he'd been sitting in his car for hours, working up the courage to knock. "I got your letter," he said quietly. We stood there for a long moment, drinking each other in. I was suddenly, painfully aware of my appearance. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, wearing an old university sweatshirt with a hole near the hem. But Richard's eyes held only tenderness as they searched my face. "May I come in?" I stepped back, gesturing him inside with a trembling hand. He moved past me into my small living room, setting the roses and wine on my coffee table next to the empty takeout containers I hadn't bothered to clear away. "I'm sorry," I started, but he held up a hand. "Let me go first," he said, turning to face me. "Please," I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. "I spent the first 3 days being angry," he began, his voice rough with emotion, feeling betrayed, questioning everything between us. "I kept thinking about how you'd kept such a huge secret, how you'd let me fall for you while hiding something that could destroy us both." My chest tightened, but I forced myself to listen. "But then I read your letter. Really read it, not just the facts, but the feelings behind them. And I realized something." He stepped closer, his dark eyes intense. "You weren't hiding the truth to manipulate me, Ashley. You were hiding it to protect me, to protect what we had." Tears I'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. "Richard, you made an impossible choice," he continued, reaching out to cup my face gently. "You could have told me and dragged me into something that would have destroyed my career along with yours, or you could have stayed silent and let Nicole continue hurting those young men. There was no clean way out." His thumbs brushed away my tears. "But you chose to protect the vulnerable, even when it cost you everything, even when it cost you us." "I lost you anyway," I whispered. "No," he said firmly. "You didn't. I'm here, aren't I?" He pulled me into his arms then, and I melted against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent and expensive cologne. For the first time in a week, I felt like I could breathe properly. "I resigned yesterday," he murmured into my hair. I pulled back to look at him, shocked. "What? I can't work for a company that would sacrifice good people to protect its image," he said. "Nicole's gone, but the culture that enabled her is still there. The executives who looked the other way, who cared more about avoiding scandal than protecting employees." I stared at him, processing this. "But your career, your reputation, will survive," he said with a slight smile. "I've been thinking about going independent for years anyway, starting my own consulting firm, being my own boss." He paused, his expression growing serious. "Actually, I have a proposition for you." My heart skipped. "Richard, be my business partner," he said. "Not just romantically, but professionally. We both have the experience, the connections, the skills. We could build something clean together, something ethical. No more toxic office politics or predatory bosses. I felt my breath catch. It was tempting, incredibly tempting, but also terrifying. It's risky, I said slowly, starting over, building a client base from scratch. Everything worthwhile is risky, he replied. But we'd be taking the risk together. Ladies, if this is making your heart race, show me some love with a like. He moved to the wine bottle, pulling out a corkscrew from his jacket pocket. I brought Sansera, he said with a small smile. Figured we had some talking to do. I watched him work, my mind racing. The practical part of me cataloged all the reasons it was a terrible idea. We barely knew each other outside of stolen moments in his office. Our relationship had been forged in secrecy and crisis. Starting a business together would be complicated, potentially disastrous, if things went wrong between us personally. But the part of me that had been slowly dying all week suddenly felt alive again. The part that remembered how perfectly we'd worked together on those financial reports, how naturally our minds had complemented each other, the part that trusted him completely, despite everything. What kind of consulting? I heard myself ask. His face lit up as he poured 2 glasses. Corporate restructuring, ethical business practices, financial optimization, companies that actually want to do better, not just look better on paper. He handed me a glass, our fingers brushing. We could specialize in cleaning up toxic workplace cultures. God knows there's enough demand. I took a sip of the crisp wine, feeling its coolness spread through me. You've really thought this through. I've had a week to think about very little else, he admitted. About you, about us, about what kind of life I want to build. And I keep coming back to the same conclusion, which is, he set down his glass and took my hands in his, that I love you, Ashley, not despite the choice you made, but because of it, because you're the kind of person who risks everything to protect others, because you're brilliant and brave and ethical to your core. My vision blurred again, but this time with tears of hope rather than despair. I love you too, I whispered, so much it scared me. Then let's be scared together, he said, pulling me closer. Let's build something beautiful out of this mess. As his lips found mine, soft and sure, and full of promise, I felt something shift inside me. The crushing weight of the past week didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Determination, hope, the thrilling terror of a new beginning. When we broke apart, I looked into his eyes and saw our future reflected there. Uncertain, yes. Risky, absolutely. But ours to create together, free from the shadows of Nicole's poison and corporate corruption. Okay, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. Let's do it. Let's build something clean. His smile was radiant as he lifted his glass. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed in tomorrow. 6 months later, I stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of our new office, watching the city lights twinkle below like scattered diamonds. brass nameplate on the door read, Sterling and Associates. Richard had insisted on putting my name first, even though he'd provided most of the initial capital. Second thoughts. Richard's voice was warm behind me, and I felt his hands settle on my shoulders. I leaned back against his chest, marveling at how natural this felt now. Never, just thinking about how far we've come. Our consulting firm had exceeded every projection. Word spread quickly about 2 executives who'd walked away from corporate corruption to build something ethical. Companies wanted partners they could trust, especially after several high-profile scandals had rocked the business world. The Morrison account signed this morning, Richard murmured against my ear. That's 12 new clients this quarter. I turned in his arms, studying the face that had become so dear to me. The silver at his temples had grown more pronounced, but the laugh lines around his eyes had deepened too. Success suited him, but more than that, happiness did. We should celebrate, I said, straightening his burgundy tie. Though I still can't believe they chose us over McKinsey. They chose us because we listen, Richard said, his fingers tracing my cheek. Because we remember what it's like to work for people who see employees as human beings, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Nicole's downfall had taught us exactly what kind of leaders we didn't want to be. Her predatory behavior had destroyed lives, but it had also shown us the power of treating people with genuine respect. Speaking of celebrating, Richard said, his eyes taking on that mischievous glint I'd learned to recognize. There's something I want to show you. He led me to the conference room, where I gasped at the transformation. White roses filled crystal vases on every surface, their petals scattered across the polished mahogany table. Candles flickered in tall silver holders, casting dancing shadows on the walls. A bottle of champagne sat chilling in an ice bucket beside 2 crystal flutes. Richard, what is all this? He took my hands, his thumbs stroking across my knuckles. Ashley, when I first saw you that day in Nicole's office, picking up those scattered papers, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, but I never imagined how much more beautiful you'd become to me. My heart started racing as he dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. You taught me that love and integrity don't have to be mutually exclusive, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. That we can build something pure out of something broken. You showed me what real courage looks like. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that protects and creates. Tears blurred my vision as he opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the candlelight like captured stars. Ashley Sterling, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything business, life, love, for whatever time we have left in this world? The words caught in my throat. 6 months ago, I'd been drowning in shame and betrayal, convinced I'd lost the only man I could ever love. Now here he was, offering me everything I'd never dared dream of. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, Richard, yes." His hands shook slightly as he slipped the ring onto my finger. And when he stood to kiss me, I tasted salt from both our tears. "I love you so much," I murmured against his lips. "I never thought I could have this happiness, this partnership, this life. We earned it," he said, holding me close. "Every difficult choice, every sleepless night, every moment we chose to do the right thing, even when it cost us everything. It led us here." He poured champagne into the crystal flutes, the bubbles rising like tiny celebrations. "To my brilliant, beautiful, impossibly brave fiancé," he said, raising his glass. "To the man who saw past my mistakes to the woman I was trying to become," I replied, clinking my glass against his. As we sipped the champagne, I thought about Nicole. The last I'd heard, she was working at a small firm in another state, her reputation in ruins. Part of me felt sorry for her. She'd had everything and thrown it away for the sick thrill of power over vulnerable people, but mostly I felt grateful. Without her betrayal, I might never have discovered my own strength or found the love of my life in the process. "What are you thinking about?" Richard asked, reading my expression with the intuition he developed over our months together. "About how strange life is," I said, setting down my glass to trace the lapels of his charcoal suit. "If someone had told me a year ago that exposing my boss's affairs would lead to finding my soulmate, I'd have thought they were insane." Richard chuckled, the sound rich and warm. "If someone had told me that the most ethical woman I'd ever meet would walk into my life in the middle of a corporate scandal, I'd have said the same thing." He pulled me closer, and I marveled at how perfectly I fit against him. At 50, Richard had a maturity and confidence that made me feel cherished rather than controlled. He valued my opinions, celebrated my successes, and supported me through every challenge our new business faced. "I have a confession," he said, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that never failed to make my pulse quicken. "Oh, I've been planning this for weeks. I had Nicole's former assistant help me get your ring size from that cocktail ring you wear sometimes." I laughed, delighted by his attention to detail. "You enlisted Marcus in your proposal." He was thrilled to help. Said it was about time someone appreciated what an incredible woman you are. Marcus had become one of our first employees, bringing his accounting expertise to Sterling and Associates. All of Nicole's former victims had found better positions, their careers no longer held hostage by her manipulation. "Dance with me," Richard said suddenly, pulling out his phone and selecting a song. As soft jazz filled the conference room, he drew me into his arms. We swayed together among the roses and candlelight, the city sparkling beyond the windows like a blessing on our future. "Mrs. Ashley Morrison," he murmured against my hair. "I like the sound of that." "I love the sound of that," I corrected, looking up at him with wonder. His kiss was soft and sure, full of promise and passion. and the deep contentment of two people who'd found their perfect match. When we broke apart, I saw our whole future reflected in his eyes, building our company together, traveling the world, maybe starting a family, growing old side by side. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For seeing who I really was, even when I couldn't see it myself. For believing in us when everything seemed impossible." Richard cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away fresh tears of joy. "Thank you," he said, "for teaching me that love isn't something you find. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. And I choose you, Ashley, today, tomorrow, and every day after that." As we kissed again, surrounded by roses and candlelight and the promise of tomorrow, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected places. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you never knew you were looking for. And sometimes, just sometimes, choosing courage over comfort leads you exactly where you belong.